How long are you going to keep staring out the window?
I just don't know what I'm doing. What's the point of all this? Does any of it matter? Maybe I should just give it up.
Let's not be hasty. I know things have been a bit rough with the whole Gao Black situation and the report of how Toei employees are overworked, underpaid, and under threat of sexual harassment, but...
But what? Maybe tokusatsu is something that's just for children. Maybe it's something that is only meant for children. Maybe I should just grow up and leave it behind.
Before you make that life choice, I think it's time that you watch ToQger.
ToQger? Really? That's your ace in the hole? I've seen the suits and mecha designs, and everything about it just seems so childish.
You've seen, at most, part of one episode.
That was enough.
Give it a chance. It might surprise you. Sometimes maturity comes from having faith and believing in something. You used to believe in yourself. Do you still believe in me?
Yes. I still believe in you.
Then trust me. It may look silly and juvenile, but there's more going on. Take a deeper look.
Okay, one last time. Today, I guess we're going to take a look at ToQger and what it means for tokusatsu to be mature. It's time for a transformation sequence. I actually lived in Japan during the time ToQger was airing. I watched a bit of it and then lost interest. It just didn't do it for me. And a good chunk of why was the aesthetics.
That's understandable. Tokuo is a really uninspired design, and all the other mecha in the show are much more impressive.
ToQger was the Sentai that aired during my last year in Japan. Probably one of the reasons I didn't keep up with it was that I was bummed that my time with the JET program was up. I'd have to go back home, and I didn't have a solid plan of what I wanted to do next with my life. That's also around the time I stopped watching Kamen Rider.
I can understand that you associate some bad memories with that time, but that was all years ago. You're always talking about how Toku fans are too judgmental about surface-level elements such as aesthetics. Well, are you going to do the same?
Alright, I'll look past the suits and the mecha. Unfortunately, one of the show's major plot twists has already been spoiled for me.
Who did it? That asshole, I'll show him a thing or two. I'll summon up
It
King
was you. When you were watching the show, you wouldn't shut up about it.
Oh, right. Terribly sorry. I was just so excited.
It's okay. I'm not as much of a stickler about spoilers as some folks are.
Right. So, in case you haven't figured it out, there will be discussion on some major plot twists for ToQger. It's impossible to talk about the show meaningfully without addressing them.
Well, I'd argue that knowing the spoilers doesn't actually make the show less enjoyable. It does change how you see these characters, and people have the right to decide how they engage with their media.
When it comes to Sentai, the element that makes or breaks the show more often than not for me is the team dynamics. The ToQgers are literal children who've been put into adult bodies. It can be off-putting to watch them act so ridiculous when you don't know that. But whether intentional or not on the part of the writers, this reflects how dismissive and cruel people can be toward how children behave.
One of the biggest problems in the childcare and education industry is people learning way too late that they don't actually like children. They just say stuff like, I have to tell them the same things every day. They just don't get it. I mean, I understand, but they're kids. As adults, we often forget how hard basic things can be for them. Sometimes we forget that they're still learning things we've known for years.
Raito using other people's changers without their permission is kind of a dick move.
But it's exactly something a child would do. There's no malice in Right, he just asks if he can be blue before taking Takachi's changer. Kids actually do play with their toys this way. One of the things that bothered me about Ryu's soldier in the beginning is that they're all supposed to be old friends who've known each other their whole lives, but they talk to each other like they met 2 weeks ago at a summer camp.
For ToQger, that's not as much of a problem because the characters actually struggle with minor amnesia. So even though they're all close friends and have been for years, there's a story reason for them to be a little exposition heavy with their dialogue.
The characters are fun to watch, but their relationships just aren't as deep or hard-hitting as in more dramatic Sentai like Time Ranger.
On the surface, yes, but take the line changes into account. This could have just been a throwaway gimmick, but it's used as a way for characters to become closer and understand each other better. For example, in the episode with Chain Shadow, Raito gives Kagura reaffirming words which helps her regain her resolve. She uses Raito's sword to bind Chain Shadow while Raito cleaves him with Kagura's claw. Another great episode involving Kagura is when she breaks Hikari's kendama. He's distant from her, and even insults her playing pretend. He's the first one to apologize, and Kagura is able to deduce that Hikari probably got the kendama from someone he loved. At the end of the episode, they line shift as they attack together, imitating the kendama.
Wow, there's actually a lot of really strong theming in this show. It's not that often that you see powers and transformations tied into actual character interactions or the theme of the episode, at least not in a way that creative. What about Wright? I've heard he's kind of a Mary Sue.
I can see why people make that complaint. He is very much the main character of the show, but he genuinely cares about all his friends and does his best to make them happy. There's an episode where he tries to cheer up hungry people by encouraging them to imagine delicious food. This does not succeed. The show establishes early on that Raito can fail.
I actually do like all these characters. While Mio and Kagura are a lot of fun, they still fall into bad Toku tropes concerning women. Kagura is supposed to be able to make herself the strongest, but she always has trouble using Hikari's axe. Meanwhile, Tokachi, who is supposed to physically be the weakest, is never shown having any issues when he's using the weapon.
Yeah, and Mio has 2 episodes that are romance-based. When you learn that she's actually a child, these episodes are not as cute in retrospect.
Despite some nitpicks I have here and there, the ToQgers are a very dynamic team. Wright is the energetic leader that inspires everyone. Tokachi is the brains. Hikari is the cunning, perceptive one. Mio is the organizer, and Kagura is the muscle, when Toei allows her to be.
The Shadow Line also have their own unique dynamics. Baron Nero's primary concern is to increase the quantity of shadows and expand the Shadow Line as much as possible. Madame Noir is focused on using her daughter to increase her own power, and Schwartz only cares about battle.
They all have excellent suit designs. The Shadow Line might be my favorite Sentai villain group just based on that.
The best Sentai and even Riders series juggle ensemble casts. What's difficult is having a hero and villain team that are both equally engaging.
The Emperor's nursemaid is the only one I'm kind of meh on. She's a late addition and is mostly there for extra bodies when the primary villains start to die.
Still, though, you have to appreciate how the relationships of the villains grow and change over time.
Yeah, you're right. Schwartz goes from being obsessed with battle to genuinely caring about glitter. Yes, I know there are fan subs where she's Gritta. I'm calling her Glitter because that fits in with the theme of the show a bit better. Likewise, Madame Noir goes from being power-hungry to actually trying to be a good mom.
Baron Nero doesn't change much, but it's interesting to see him keep his devotion to the Emperor, even when Zeto doesn't exactly live up to his expectations.
Yeah, Zed is one of my favorite big bads now. He's pathetic and tragic at the same time. He saw something beautiful and wanted to have it for himself, even though it wasn't his to have.
It parallels perfectly with Akira. When Zeto saw the light in the darkness, his goal became to consume and take it as his own. Akira saw a rainbow and was so moved by its beauty, he made a vow to protect it.
While we're on the subject, Akira is amazing. A monster of the week who joins the team is a brilliant concept, and I'm surprised it hasn't been used in future Sentai.
Every week he is willing to die, because he's a monster and that's what they do. But on top of Akira's cool mech and suit, he challenges the core ToQgers in interesting ways.
Once again, the line change gimmick is used to express theme and character. All the ToQgers are childhood friends and share many experiences. Akira is not a core part of their group. He doesn't have their shared memories, and so they can't line change with him until the very end when he's become a full member of their group.
And that scene in the V cinema where it turns out that he was basically their imaginary friend, who never stopped looking out for them. Even when they didn't remember him anymore.
Do you need a tissue?
What? No, I'm just leaking lubricant.
You're confusing your continuity with Power Rangers again.
Fine. I'm just leaking Gaiatron or whatever. I just need to throw myself into a volcano to restore my powers, something.
Yeah, he's gonna be a while. Guess I'll just finish watching ToQger by myself then.
Sorry about that. Sometimes my morphin grid matrix becomes unstable and it just looks like I'm crying, but...
I finished watching the series and the V cinema.
Right. Well, did you learn anything?
Yeah, I did.
Time Ranger and Shinkanger are very popular with the adult Sentai fanbase and are considered some of the best work produced by writer Yasuko Kobayashi.
We talked a bit about Kobayashi in our video about Kamen Rider Ryuki and Kamen Rider Dragon Knight.
As of this video, ToQger is the last Sentai Kobayashi helmed as the head writer. And honestly, I feel like ToQger is much more interesting than either Shinkanger or Time Ranger.
ToQger is beloved by a very niche and specific part of the Toku fandom. People who actually watched it. You have shows like Zyuranger, which have cool premises. Ancient dinosaur warriors fighting an ancient, evil witch. Sounds awesome. But most of the episodes are about convincing children to listen to their parents and brush their teeth before going to bed.
ToQger, in contrast, sounds really stupid when you first hear it. Train-themed heroes use the power of imagination to fight the evil Shadow Line. But then you watch it, and it's actually about growing up. Leaving the comforts of childhood and accepting the responsibilities of adulthood is very scary.
The ToQgers themselves also interact with other children in a mature way. For instance, Tokachi explaining to a child the difference between imagination and a wish. Again, part of growing up is understanding that confidence in yourself is different from blind faith.
One of the show's big twists at the end is that the Castle Terminal, the base of the Shadow Line, has been at their hometown the entire time.
While we don't know for certain how intentional this is from the writers, there seems to be a parallel with what it's like to visit your childhood home as an adult.
Throughout the whole show, the ToQgers want to find their home. They share their positive memories of it, and it's heartbreaking when they find it and see how much it's changed. This isn't the idyllic home of their childhood. It's empty and lifeless.
Once you grow up, you can never view your childhood home in the same way again.
At the end of the series, they do restore their town and get to continue their lives as children. So while the metaphor isn't perfect, it's still very strong and can still hit you hard if you're an adult viewer.
ToQger also has some of the best crossover and post-show material.
The ToQger game crossover was really neat. I kind of hope after Superhero Senki that we start seeing more yearly Kamen Rider Super Sentai crossovers.
But what makes this work for me is again the theming. Raito tells Kota how nice it must be to be able to protect his town. Like Raito, Kota is trying to grow up and figure out what it means to be mature.
Wait, are you telling me that we had a Kamen Rider and Super Sentai series in the same year that focused on maturity and what it means to become an adult?
Yes, which is interesting, but talking about Gaim is a bit off topic and probably something we should do another time. Raito and his friends are trying to find their hometown, which at this point in the show they still have fond memories of. So from Raito's perspective, Kota is in an enviable position.
Yeah, but Koda is watching the town he loves decay and become corrupted by the Yggdrasil Corporation's desire to control the power of the Lock Seeds.
The whole special feels a lot more in line with ToQger's sensibilities than Gaim's, but that's just who the ToQgers are.
It was also neat to see Daigo from Kyoryuger, a character known for his endless optimism, lose his cool for even just a brief moment when he learns that the ToQgers are children. The ToQger vs. Ninja movie was also fun, but I've barely watched Ninja and don't have much to say on that.
What did you think of the ToQger Returns V Cinema?
I've seen both the Hurricaneger and Deca Ranger 10 Years After films, and I wasn't impressed. In fact, I don't really like watching post-series content because a lot of times it's just disappointing or a mixed bag, but I love the ToQger V Cinema.
It feels like a proper epilogue to the series. We see our characters grow up, but also grow out of touch with their imagination. Through time travel, they get to meet their younger selves and rediscover important parts of their identities they felt they had to give up.
That's something that hits me particularly hard today, for reasons that I feel should be obvious to everyone. The debate about how silly or serious Toku should be is a debate that still rages on in the fandom even today.
Yes, but focusing too much on that kind of misses the point, doesn't it?
In my experience, the quality of a show is not based on the maturity of the premise, or even the likability of the characters. At its heart, the question is, does the show believe in its own premise?
For the Halloween episode, I took a brief look at Ghost, and it's amazing just how little the show seems to believe in itself.
Synchronizing with the values of heroes of the past to gain the power of their souls is an interesting concept that Ghost abandons several times or doesn't really integrate into the actual story outside of a small handful of episodes, like the one about Benkei.
I did some digging, and the writer of that episode of Ghost also wrote the ToQger Gaim crossover, so that's neat.
Saber also has this issue. It makes a big deal early on about using the right combination of Wonder Ride books and how special it is to use 3 tomes at once. But then you just get Ultra Forms, or Dragons, pop-up books, or whatever that just completely throw that out the window. So what was the point of all that?
ToQger introduces most, if not all, of its main mechanics early on and actually sticks with them, with the exception being the Hyper Russia upgrade, which I'm not a big fan of.
In the beginning, the ability to use each other's suits is just a gimmick, but as the show goes on, they get more creative with it, such as Hikari pretending to be Tokachi to trick a monster who planted a bomb on him into thinking he escaped it.
I also really love when they go to their first Shadow Town. Because of the amount of darkness present, they can only stay transformed for a limited time. They get around this by giving all the trains to one member of the team, who then takes advantage of the line change to extend how long they can use their powers.
The restriction is great, and it's expert storytelling that the solution is a new use of a pre-existing ability, rather than a deus ex machina in the form of a new power-up.
Which unfortunately gets undone when they get the deus ex machina power-up. I don't hate the Hyper Russia form, and I see why it's there. The mid-season upgrade is a staple of Sentai and it sells more toys, but it's still really disappointing.
The point is that a lot of ToQger's more dramatic moments, such as the first Shadow Town, aren't created through injected angst or violence. It's about presenting the characters with a new problem and letting them come up with their own solutions.
ToQger is one of the most sincere Toku shows I've watched in a long time. While this team of Sentai isn't my favorite cast of characters, it feels like the writers, directors, and producers believed in the product they were creating. So no matter how silly ToQger is, those dramatic moments still shine. Not because they're gritty, but because they're genuine and real.
While you do have shows like Garo, most of the time Tokusatsu tries to overly adult, it doesn't go well.
Last year, I finally watched Kamen Rider Shin. Not to be confused with the upcoming Shin Kamen Rider from acclaimed director Hideaki Anno. And it was just boring. The parts of the film where stuff was happening, like the grotesque body horror or well-choreographed fight scenes, were entertaining.
But so much of that film is empty dialogue exchanges or boring monologues on phones.
While Kamen Rider Shin has its fans, it failed at the time to get an audience. It's not hard to see why. It was trying to cater to the now adult fans of the franchise that had seen the show as kids, but it took out everything that made the show popular to those adults when they were kids in the first place.
The sad thing is that Keita Amemiya, the following year, would direct Kamen Rider Z-O, which is a much better film. It has the stronger edge and maturity of Shin, but without the gratuitous gore or pointless phone conversations.
ToQger is proof that telling a mature story is about sincerity. I was in a play in college called Skapan, or Skapin. Our director was obsessive about pronunciation to the point that he changed a city one of the characters was from because he didn't like how we were pronouncing the word Toronto. The production overall was a giant mess for a number of reasons, but the director did say one thing that still sticks with me. It's the only piece of direction that we all actually thought was good. What he said to us was, "It doesn't matter how silly the situation is. Your characters believe it is real. For them, this is their life. They don't see this as goofy or silly, so be sincere." And that is a perfect description of ToQger. No matter how ridiculous the situation is, the characters always take it seriously. And that allows for real drama to happen.
So, is this the end? Are we done?
No, we're not done yet. I mean, I can't do this forever. Sooner or later, I am going to have to move on to other projects, but that should be because that's the road life is taking me, and not because I want to be seen as mature by others.
I'm glad you feel that way. I like this little thing that we do.
I do too. I still remember when we just started. It's hard to think that we've been doing this for years now.
It does still feel like we only started yesterday.
As always, till next time, may the power protect you.
And as you all grow older, stay true to yourselves. Don't let your light go out.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Our intro music was provided by Marshland Media. Please consider listening to their Sentai-themed podcast, Mostly Speakin' Sentai. Our thumbnail was provided by Buster Bluey. Please consider checking out their stuff in the links below. As of this video, ToQger has never received an official international release, so if you're interested in watching it with English subtitles, you are going to have to pirate it. Sorry.